So, there's a very important trade agreement that I hadn't heard of, and I thought I hear of trade agreements, and it's the EU and South Korea have signed a free trade deal. And then I go to South Korea, and I find all of these brands that I know so well. Is this important to me?
It is, because my guess is that probably at this point, there's probably somebody you know, or you yourself owns a Korean-made product. And so over the years, the Korean companies have done a reasonable job, both in terms of pricing and quality, to make themselves competitive with anything that's made in the world in terms of electronics and automobiles. And why that's key is that there's two parts of it. One is the Korean economy has been growing, but the inflation rate's been growing at a faster rate than wages. So, you know, to improve the quality of life among the Korean population, you've got to cut living expenses, basic living expenses. So what it's going to allow, the agreement's going to allow the Korean government to do is import things like meats and rice and staples.
Where they couldn't do it before.
Well, they couldn't do it before, and now only import it, but do it without tariffs. And so the estimates are anywhere from a third to a half the cost of this daily things that are consumed by the average family. That's a significant savings. And on the flip side, it allows the Korean products to find new markets that it didn't have before.
Okay, so I'm starting to hear a little bit of a switch in the news. The news might be kind of good. All right, I'm 55 years old. Do I still have time to retirement plan?
Yes, of course.
And do I go buy Samsung?
Maybe.
I have a phone.
It depends.
It depends on your risk tolerance. It depends on a lot of different factors. But if you're 55, it's time to get serious. What you need is you need to know exactly where you're going, and you need to have a realistic appraisal of how to get there. It's a time to look deeply at your finances and make sure that you're not taking any unnecessary risk. You can take more risk earlier, but at this point, you don't have nearly as much time to catch up if something goes wrong.
Yeah, it's just basically moving forward with a plan. You wouldn't get off the plane in China without a map or a GPS. And, you know,
So moving forward with a plan. Okay.
And a company, if you were starting a business, you would not do it without a business plan. You would never be successful.
So at 55, there's still time, but not a lot.
That's actually a pretty decent time to start is when you're in your mid-50s. There's still enough time.
Okay, well, you know, maybe, just maybe, if I-1098 passes here in Washington State, I'll get to pay just a lot of taxes or not. So basically, I need to ask this question because we're coming right home, right next door. How will an income tax affect Washington State's economy?
It'll affect it relatively dramatically. What we have is we've seen basic services cut pretty dramatically in the state budget, and what we're seeing is more dramatic cuts. Some of the infrastructure we were talking about, one of the important parts is the University of Washington, which is a large driver of economics in the western part of the state. You keep cutting this, and you're going to end up cutting long-term growth in anything. So where are you going to get the money for this? Well, if you raise taxes on middle class and poor, you're going to harm already an economy that's already fragile. There's one area where you could raise taxes without harming the economy, and that is on the very wealthy. A couple problems with this, though, too. On the other side, there's a fairness issue. Okay, only one group is paying this tax, not everybody. Okay, and the other side is a lot of people argue that for Washington State, not having a state income tax gives us a competitive advantage in bringing in talent, bringing in money from outside. However, when you probably look at both of these, the fairness advantage probably tilts towards having the tax. Because the one thing that we've noticed is in the last 15, 20 years is the wealthy, via tax changes mostly, have done way better.
So, so here's one financial advisor that says, yeah, it's a good thing to do.
In my opinion, it's similar. When you're in crisis mode, you have to manage it. And it doesn't have to be a permanent solution, but you have to do some damage control. And at this point, you don't want, like Eric alluded to, you don't want to cut things too much because then it's going to do more harm than good.
Like in Ireland.
Yeah. So what you want to do is you got to raise revenue. And it becomes a philosophical question and a fair and legal one is where does it make sense for the time being to raise that revenue from?
I've got to skip over because we're running out of time. I want to skip over to the slide that's entitled Ethnic Background Impact on Retirement. We here in Western Washington especially, we pride ourselves on our diversity. Is there a difference based on ethnic background in the way you save, the way you look towards retirement, the way you do things?
I'm obviously of South Korean heritage, and Eric, it doesn't look like, but he's half Italian. so we have some we have clients that are first-generation immigrants, and I think that's not just a stereotype, but the thing that we see is first-generation immigrants, because of their cultures and because of just being in a new place and being extra cautious, tend to save more. And they not only tend to save more, but they tend to save more for retirement and for the emergency rainy day type of funds. So they do. There is a different culture.
So you're second or third generation. So you spend like a drunken sailor, just like all the rest of us, right?
No, I'm kind of 1.5 generation actually. I was born in Korea, and so I tend to be more towards the first generation mindset of not having spending beyond your means and really saving as much as possible. So in my case personally, that's kind of my own philosophy.
So we got 30 minutes of show at least left, and we have what, 2 minutes? Okay, I've got to get to this. You're age 75, and how could you tell if you planned enough? Can you do anything at that point?
Yes, you can. There are several issues. Health care and long-term care expenses, you might think it's too late, but probably not. It's too late to get a traditional long-term care policy and so forth, but there are other strategies that can be very effective even at 75 and older.
Even in this economic environment that we've talked about.
And by the time you're 75, you pretty much know if you're going to outlive your money or not. So then it's time for legacy planning, transferring wealth to your next generation or to charities. And there's definitely smarter ways to position those assets for that to happen efficiently and without probate.
All right, so we've talked about an awful lot of negative news that there's out there. In all of this, I mean, do you have people coming to you and saying, I can't make heads or tails of any of this, can you help me? Is that what they say?
Yes.
A lot of times, yes, most of the time.
So what's the response?
We can help. We do understand this. And really, we talk about the negative things because they're more interesting, but there's a heck of a lot of positive out here as well.
What's positive? Help me.
The resiliency and strength of the United States economy and the world economy is very positive. You have a lot of growth going on outside and a little growth going on here. But if you see some of the local businesses, they're doing very, very well.
Yeah. Our job is to provide objective information and advice, unfiltered, and that's what we try to do. So I think that's the greatest value, is being advisors that provide that information as unfiltered as possible and objective as possible.
Where do the jobs come from? Where do the new jobs come from that are going to drive this economy?
Well, I think I mentioned if I had control of the entire U.S. Treasury, I would probably throw it towards growth in small business. That's the quickest result. That's where you can drive the results the fastest.
Well, we're almost right out of time. Thank you very much for being with us. It is a confusing thing, but you can help with the confusion. Just give them a call at 206-281-7250 and extension 5330. And don't forget, keep scanned. Send an email to richard.conlon@seattle.gov. We'll see you right here on Public Exposure next week. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
30 minutes flies back.